I believe we are live. We'll just wait till everyone shows up. But welcome to our NBA free agency special where we're just gonna talk about all the rumors that we've been seeing all day, the past few days. Obviously, we posted our episode yesterday and we had some thoughts over there too. And we also talked about James Harden towards the end of the podcast too. So make sure to tune into that podcast as well. But without further ado, hold on.
I'm on.
Yeah, all right. All right. All right, we're good now. Anyways, as I was saying, if you guys. All right. Technical difficulties, but we're back now.
There we go.
Wait, wait. Fix your camera real quick.
Hold on, give me a second.
Yeah.
Because I was still. Hold on, give me a second. There we go.
All right. Now we're fine. Anyways, make sure to tune in to the last episode if you want more free agency thoughts because we will be talking about rumors and potential deals that could happen in the near future as well. So I did we did reinstall Twitter, so that account is back. So literally I just did it for free agency, but I really don't like the platform. But anyways, follow us on all the social media platforms you see on screen right now. But without further ado, let's get it started. Later on in the live stream, I posted a poll on Instagram for you guys to respond with your free agency predictions. And so we'll get on to that later in this live stream. But everyone, thanks for tuning in. I mean, we can just start off by I feel like the biggest thing we've heard recently is James Harden. You talked about and then I kind of touched on it, but you mentioned James Harden. What's he going to do? People are mentioning the Rockets. The Rockets seem to have pulled out. The Spurs, kind of like a sleeper. None of us agree with that move. And then, honestly, out of left field, Harden opts into his contract not to stay with the Sixers, but to actually find a deal somewhere else. And personally, that makes no sense for me. Like, that makes absolutely no sense because the Sixers, they are one of the only teams that Harden fits on that can actually compete as well. And I mean, if he goes to the Clippers, depending on what the Clippers give up, it's just going to be a huge loss for Philly. Like, if it's not Paul George, then honestly, it's a loss. And we got a report earlier today that teams are monitoring Antetokounmpo's situation in Milwaukee. Like, I don't think Giannis requests a trade or doesn't sign a contract. That's just weird. But could we potentially see a Drew Holiday being traded? Obviously, and I know that. But James Harden and Giannis don't like each other. And maybe that doesn't work out, but people are talking about Giannis potentially being traded, which won't happen. But you look at another star, Joel Embiid. I mean, he keeps saying trust the process in Philly. At some point, man, like Philly, they should have kept Jimmy Butler, but they chose Tobias Harris for some reason. And people saying that both the Butler Embiid and Harden Embiid duo they made it to the second round. Yes, that's true, but the Harden Embiid duo lost way more embarrassingly. And if the Kawhi Leonard shot didn't go in, I feel like the Sixers still would have won and advanced to the next round. Just because of Jimmy Butler. So Harden, I'm not sure what's going on. Like, does he really care about winning? Because recently he's always talked about, oh, I want to be on a contending team. A ring would make me one of the greatest guards ever. Like, Philly is your shot. Like, okay, fine. Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. That might be a great trio, but health is always a factor. Chemistry is always a factor. Like you saw with the Nets, Harden, Kyrie, KD, there wasn't really chemistry. And so chemistry is really a factor. It's not always superstars being assembled on one team and it always works out. So, I mean, just my take on it. I don't know what's going on with Harden, to be honest. We'll see if he is dealt, if he mends relationships in Philly, but I think it's just crazy to me that he's about to be traded for a third time in the past year, year and a half. It seems like year and a half, 2 years. It's just crazy to me that it's actually happening. So, what are your thoughts then on this James Harden report?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of great points, but I mean, it looks like he is going to be traded to the Clippers, so that's what it seems like at this point. But if you're not trading for Paul George, I don't understand the deal out of the 76ers because you have Joel Embiid. He is your championship window, and you're closing that window if you do trade James Harden for whatever couple many pieces you get back. Like I don't care what it is you get back. It could be a million for some picks. It could be all the players on the team other than Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I don't care what you get. You're not gonna compete for a championship with Joel Embiid with such a well Embiid on your team. Like that's not gonna happen because you also trade Tobias Harris, and you're not gonna get much out of him either because his contract is so huge that you're probably only get complimentary guys, and you can't just have complimentary guys around Joel Embiid. I'm sorry, it's just not going to work in this today's NBA. You need a second All Star, borderline All Star to be next to you, or else you're not going to win a championship. Especially Joel Embiid because the NBA is not a post center game anymore. It's all about 3 point game, and if you don't have a guy who can get you 25 points from 3 point line, like you're not gonna win any games. Honestly, you're not gonna win any championships. That's for sure. Uh, of course, for the Clippers, that trio, that would be a pretty good trio. But like we've seen with the Nets and the Suns now, and a lot of other teams, it's not gonna work out. Honestly, especially like you said, the injuries. There's gonna be so many injuries on that team. They're all gonna be out for at least 30 games. It seems like it's guaranteed. Like you're not. You might just barely limp into the playoffs at this point. And then once you get in
Yeah,
the playoffs, Kawhi might be hurt, or Paul George might be hurt, or Harden might be hurt. You never really know. Like it's going to be injury after injury after injury for that team.
yeah. I mean, I agree with what you said. Like, at some point, it's like it just gets like when I first got into the NBA, it never was like these stars just requesting trades left and right. Like honestly, I never understood that because it used to be like loyalty is still somewhat of a thing for some players like Damian Lillard. It was for Bradley Beal, and Bradley Beal did something Damian Lillard should and realize he can't compete on the team he currently is in and just get traded. Portland's not going to trade Dame to a random team because they want to do right by Dame. And I think they should. And we'll just get into the Damian Lillard rumors now. And Damian Lillard, the front office may have told you we still plan to compete with you, but it's just not going to happen. And Draymond is expected to re-sign in Golden State. Even if the Trailblazers somehow sign Draymond, which likely isn't going to happen, it just becomes a factor that Portland is still not going to be competing. Damian Lillard, Scoot Henderson, Draymond, Jeremy Grant, if they keep Jeremy Grant, and then whatever center. Like they might move on from Yusuf Nurkic. I think they should. But you trade Nurkic, you trade Damian Lillard, you keep Anthony Simons. Because Anthony Simons, he is a great young guard, but at this point, it'll be great for the rebuild. Like I don't think even Anthony Simons, Grant, and picks. I don't think they'll be able to compete because for whatever reason, Pascal Siakam wants to stay in Toronto. I don't get that, especially if Houston gives Fred VanVleet the bag, which is looking like 2 years, 80 million, which is a massive overpay for VanVleet. I'd give him like 25 mil or something, or like high 20s, but 40 is way too much. But I mean, Houston's Houston. They're looking for guys to maybe make a play-in push, maybe with Amin Thompson now with their draft pick. But it was back to Damian Lillard of just recognize no matter what the front office does, you won't be able to compete. And I think with the Western Conference, with the way it is now, Bradley Beal moving to the Suns, the Western Conference is so stacked. I don't think any player you trade for, if it's not a superstar, like if you somehow pull off a trade for Paul George, I don't think it happens. Then I will say, oh, Portland's a great team. But it needs to be a superstar next to Dame. It can't be just a star because they don't even have the right surrounding pieces to contend. So what is your reaction to the whole Damian Lillard situation, and where do you think you should go?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that they stuck with the number 3 overall pick, and then Dame just doesn't. He hasn't voiced anything from what we know of. He hasn't voiced any disgruntledness or anything, and I think I totally agree with you that he should want out of there. Uh, the Blazers already have 2 great pieces now for their rebuild. Now that they kept the number 3 overall pick, but if you're Damian Lillard, you want to chase that ring. You want to get out of there and not be part of the rebuild because you're in your prime ish right now. I mean, you trying to kind of trailing toward the tail end of your career, but you want to win a ring while you still can, while you're still one of the best guards in the NBA right now, and the best chance is definitely not in Portland, probably on Miami, like you said before. I think that Miami is a great destination for him. Him and Jimmy Butler, that'd be a great duo, especially after everything that they did this season in the playoffs. So I think that Dame should want out. I don't understand why he'd want to stay. And then there's also all the other stars that we've seen that could be disgruntled. Like Embiid could be disgruntled if the Harden pieces aren't right. We could see Giannis be disgruntled if they don't re-sign all their guys. We could see a lot of disgruntled stars, and it's really frustrating to see. I mean, I understand it from the small market teams because you don't have a lot of money, and the cap. I mean, the NBA, where the NBA is right now, it's just against the small market teams. But you gotta at least try to do something to keep these stars around because that's the way you sell tickets. And they've been so loyal, like Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal. He's been so loyal to your teams. You gotta at least try your best to make this team as good as possible. The Portland Trailblazers, after another point guard, is not making the team as good as possible. You got 3 guard lineup, which is not gonna help you win any games, especially in the tough Western Conference. You're not gonna win a whole lot of games. You'll probably be a playing team, but that's as far as it goes. Um, yeah, I mean, you just have to at least try to make your team as good as possible. Like the A's, like the small market team, but they don't even try to make the team good. NBA teams, they have enough money to at least try and make these teams competitive, but sometimes they just don't, and they just go for the business side of it, which is really stupid. But unfortunately, that's the way it is. Dame, you need to get out of there as quick as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're hesitant to trade Anthony Simons because he's a great young guard. Fine. But it's about maximizing the championship window for Dame, and I don't think the Blazers realize that throughout ever since 2019 was their best chance. They were in the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors, and obviously the Warriors being the Warriors, they swept them. But instead of surrounding him with pieces, because it became so evident that Dame and McCollum, they might have fit together, but those aren't enough. And they never really did anything. Like the Robin Lopez, LaMarcus Aldridge unexpectedly leaving years ago to the Spurs. Nicholas Batum, those were nice pieces around Damon. I'm not saying if they stuck together they should have won, but if you surrounded pieces like that next to Dame, they would have competed because I feel like Dame would still be happy in Portland and people would still feel like they're a competing team if they surrounded pieces like that around Damian Lillard. And obviously, that didn't happen, and we're in this position. And so I feel like the Warriors, they're maximizing their championship window by trading for Jordan Poole. I mean, trading away Jordan Poole for Chris Paul. That's what the Warriors effectively did, maximizing the championship window and the time they have with Steph, Clay, and Draymond as a trio. Obviously, the trade may seem weird. We've talked about it a million times at this point. But Chris Paul kind of fits in that bench role. We'll see what happens. Small ball might not be that effective anymore because the Warriors have had a lot of rebounding challenges. But I'm just saying, Chris Paul might be really old, but he's got a few good years left in him, just like the Warriors core. Obviously, Steph will play for longer, Draymond will play for longer, Clay will play for longer than Chris Paul, but you're easily competing with Chris Paul on your team, either starting for a bit or in his bench role where I think Chris Paul fits the best. We'll talk to Steve Kerr on that. It's not our decision. And Draymond Green, he's expected to return to the Warriors. I honestly, his first free agency some years ago, he said he thought he was going to Boston, Detroit, and then the Warriors realized what his value is. Mike Dunleavy and Steve Kerr both said we don't compete without Draymond, and I agree with them that we don't compete without Draymond. I think we'll realize his value, and I think he eventually stays with the Golden State Warriors because, I mean, I feel like everyone knows at this point they won't compete without Draymond. And years ago, there were reports he went here, he went there, like Damian Lillard's recruiting him. It's like the same thing happens. I think Draymond does stay the Golden State Warriors. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't really see him going anywhere else. I mean, the chemistry on that team is just far too great to overcome. I mean, the Warriors without Draymond is honestly just not a very good team. I mean, of course, you still have Stephen Clay, which is going to be good enough, but you're not going to win a championship without Draymond on your team. Like, as silly as it may sound for some of you guys, like Draymond is that defensive staple the Warriors need, and he is that playmaker that the Warriors need because Curry, as great as he is with the ball in his hands, he's far better with the ball not in his hands and moving around the court, running around everywhere. Draymond setting a screen for him, giving him the ball, whatever Draymond may be doing. Like Curry is just so deadly when he's off the ball. He doesn't have the ball in his hands because you really can't keep up with him. He's just gonna run around everywhere, literally just screen after screen and cut after cut. He's gonna be everywhere on the court, and you can't keep up with him. Uh, Even if you try your hardest, you literally just can't. He's just way too good. He will find a way to get open, and then once he's open, you're screwed because he's gonna get the ball and knock down a three in your face. That's just how it is. And yeah, Draymond is a very, very key part of this team, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we talked about the Houston Rockets already. Like, they're in a position where obviously they won't compete, but with Van Vliet and potentially Dylan Brooks, say what you want about him, he still brings the heart every day. But, I mean, the Rockets are in a position where they might fight for like the 10th seed or something, but that will still be progress and a positive step in the rebuild. We'll see where they are in a couple of years because they would be overpaying for Van Vliet. And the Suns, Clippers, they're in a weird situation, and the Suns and Lakers cap space. I'm hearing reports of, oh, Kyrie is taking calls from the Suns to make like Kyrie, Beal, Booker, KD. That would like too many ball dominant people. No chemistry will be formed other than Kyrie and KD. And again, the Warriors are an example. They're literally the gold standard of a team should be how a team should be constructed because uh, they don't have like the very best players, as in like obviously Steph is one of the best in the NBA, but you see LeBron has Anthony Davis and everything like that, but they just have the same chemistry, and that's what makes them compete. That's what teams don't realize because it's not, oh, put superstars together and then you can automatically compete. Kevin Durant happens to be one of the best players to fit in almost any system, and that's why the Warriors won their championship. Of course, because of the talent, but they all understood their role and chemistry wise. So the Suns, they'll have to sign like veteran minimum guys for the rest of their roster with the amount of money they're paying Beal, Booker, KD, and Ayton. Lakers too. I mean, people are saying Kyrie and Draymond, Kyrie, Draymond. They're gonna have to pay these guys, and that involves losing Rui Hachimura, losing Austin Reeves with the amount of money he's gonna get offered. So if they want to keep their core, then they're not getting Kyrie or Draymond. So what do you think of their respective cap space situations?
Yeah, I mean, Suns. We've talked about it so many times. I mean, you can add all the stars you want, but it's just not going to work out. I mean, maybe if you do add the right better minimum guys, who there might be some other guys that might take the better minimum who maybe don't deserve it, but might take it anyway just to get the ring. But I mean, that maybe will give you a chance, but yeah, like you said, there's too many ball dominant guys, especially if they do trade for Kyrie Irving. But even if they do trade for Kyrie Irving, I honestly think that would be a great move for the Dallas Mavericks because I would think that they would get DeAndre Ayton. So if you add Luka and DeAndre Ayton, I think that's a pretty good duo. I don't think it makes them title contenders at all, but I think that's a pretty good duo, especially for Luka Doncic, who hasn't had the greatest center, or isn't the center he needs to be on that team. Like he's had Porzingis, but Porzingis wasn't exactly the center that Luka Doncic needs, and I think that DeAndre Ayton can be that. But they also did draft Derek Lively, who's honestly I think is going to be very very great next to Luka Doncic. And then for the Lakers, yeah, I mean Kyrie, Braun, and AD would be nice, but I think considering what happened this year, the trade deadline, you got all complementary pieces for your team. I think you got to stick with that because it worked out pretty well. It got you pretty far, but it didn't get you far enough, but it got you pretty far still. And I think that with one more year under their belt, they can definitely mold into a good team, especially if they do sign some other complementary pieces that will fill out the roster and make their bench competitive with other benches in the NBA.
I agree. And as for the Kyrie Irving situation, I mean, a report came today that Kyrie could have potentially asked the Sixers to see what they're offering to force Dallas's hand. If he goes to the Sixers in a sign and trade, uh, the Dallas Mavericks should not even, I mean, ask for Harden at that point, because it's just gonna be a nightmare. Like, I don't know how teams haven't learned that chemistry is really, really, really important, and that's very underrated today. And I mean, the Warriors won in 2022. They didn't have like the best roster, but they had chemistry. I keep mentioning the Warriors, but they're just the gold standard of how roster should be constructed. Like recognizing that these players, there is only a limited time that they can compete, and they surrounded the core with the right pieces. And so you got Kyrie and Dallas. They really um, stumbled towards the end of the season and actually tanked that last game and chose to pick. Obviously, Derek Lively, we'll see. I also think he's going to be great for Dallas. And so we'll see what happens with Kyrie and James Harden. They're a huge domino this offseason. And we talk about the direction of the Trailblazers. Mentioned Pascal Siakam a little bit. He wants to stay in Toronto for some reason. Like, I just don't get that, especially if Van Vliet leaves. I feel like you wait. I feel like there's rumors that the Van Vliet and Dylan Brooks news could be broken today. If it is true and Van Vliet goes to the Rockets and just ignore Dylan Brooks for now, then Siakam should request to be traded because what are you doing in Toronto? They're not going to compete. one like Grady Dick is not gonna make you compete by any means. So just request a deal, and the report that he's not going to sign an extension with the team that trades for him, I really don't understand why you want to stay in a losing situation. And there was also another report, Kyle Kuzma, a great like third, fourth, fifth option, whatever, great role player. Apparently, there's some reports that he might stay in DC. Like, I get if you're being offered the bag, but I will only take the bag if it's like towards the end of my career, to be honest. Because Kyle Kuzma is already a great young guy, and if he's just going to be wasting his talents away in DC if he does stay in DC. So Siakam, I don't know why he's being adamant and waiting to stay in Toronto. I just don't get that. So what do you think Siakam should do?
Yeah, I totally agree that he should get out of there. And even if you do re-sign Van Vliet somehow, the ceiling in that team is just not very high at all. You have a lot of great talent in OG Anunoby and Scotty Barnes and Siakam and Pirtle. Well, not Pirtle for now, but Bush and like all the other young guys that you have on that team. There's a lot of talent there, but you just really it just doesn't mold together that well, like we've seen so many times already these past few years. Um, I mean, all of them are capable of scoring like 20 points, but it just doesn't seem to fit together well at all. And I think if you're the Raptors, you need to be like, okay, we need to choose a few of these guys, like maybe keep Scotty Barnes and OG Anunoby and Grady Dick, maybe build around that young core and trade away Siakam and just let Fred VanVleet walk, and then start the rebuild there, start the retooling, I guess you would say there. I think you can get some great pieces for Pascal Siakam to help with that rebuild, no matter what team you trade him to. Uh, and I think that's definitely the direction they should go. Unfortunately for them, I mean, because you have a great team, but you're not going to get past the second round. Maybe probably second round, honestly, in the East Conference, which is really tough with Boston, of course, with Milwaukee, with uh, Philadelphia, with all those great teams. It's just you're not going to be able to compete enough with that team. You need to retool and surround your young core with a couple of pieces that fit well together, like the Warriors did. Had the young core, got the couple of pieces they needed, and won 3 championships, obviously, or 4 championships, obviously. So, got to do that if you're the Toronto Raptors.
I agree, and obviously the players themselves and staff won't admit it. They got a ring because the Warriors were literally depleted, and I mean that's just a fact. And so Siakam, like you can meet with the front office like Dame did. You're not gonna compete at all. I promise you that. Even if Van Vliet stays, I don't think he stays because I feel like now Van Vliet recognizes he won't be able to win in Toronto, and so he might not be able to win in Houston. But if Houston indeed is offering double the amount he's being paid right now, it's rumored to be 2 years, 81 million, which is, like I said, a massive overpay, then I guess just go for the bag. But that would entail Siakam. I think he should leave. Kyle Lowry left, got traded because of the same, sort of the same thing. And so it would be crazy. Siakam's a huge domino. People were speculating that the Hawks could swap uh, John Collins and Siakam. Obviously, more picks and players involved in that deal. The Hawks, I mean, that John Collins trade was so terrible. Like, they're in the deal making mode. Like, getting Clint Capella was the worst decision because the pick and roll lobs were perfect. Like, DeJounte Murray was a great trade, but I mean, Clint Capella is just weird on that team. Like, you also have Onyeka Okongwu who splits minutes with him, and so it just creates like a weird dynamic, which is why the Hawks didn't compete. And you literally just downgraded. All it took for Collins was like Rudy Gay in a second. Like, I get salary dump and whatever, but if you're still trying to compete, then and make deals. I don't know why you got literally zero assets in that deal. I thought it was way more. I think you thought it would be way more assets for John Collins. I think everyone thought that too. So, what do you make of the Hawks situation going into free agency?
Yeah, they're definitely in a very interesting situation, and I think what really happened there was that they've been wanting to trade Collins for such a long time. Like, I think his value just kept depleting and depleting and depleting because everyone knew he was coming at some point. They knew they had to move on from John Collins, but they just didn't pull the trigger in these past few years, and now they finally pulled the trigger. But it was just a little too late, I think, is what it was. But I think John Collins will do well on the Jazz next to Lauri Markkinen and Walker Kessler and all the other guys on that team. I think that'll be great tall team. It's a very tall team for sure, but I think that they can still do well. And then yeah, for the Hawks, they're in a really weird situation. Uh, I mean, that team is all right on paper. I just don't think that it's that good. Uh, I mean, Dejounte obviously is very good. Trae Young is very good. Capella is good. Aneka is good, but it just doesn't mold altogether that well. Like you said, I think that you had that great pick and roll, but now it does not mesh together well whatsoever. I think you may need to move on from Capella because Onyeka Okongwu looks like it might be his time to start soon. And I think if you can trade Capella for some complementary pieces, like you mentioned so many times, complementary pieces, they're very important. I think that you can maybe consider them getting a little bit more competitive. I wouldn't say they're going to be competing, but for a title, but they're going to be a pretty good team. They're going to make some noise out in this conference.
Yeah, I agree. And there's going to be a great free agency period, like is a lot of other free agencies. But I mean, Trae Young could be a potential guy on the move in the coming years. Obviously, not this free agency, but I mean, the Hawks, they just keep fumbling for whatever reason. And so that covers, let's see, literally made notes on this. Talked about James Harden and everything, Suns, Lakers, and directions of the Trailblazers. And so now the competing teams, they just need depth. So we'll do kind of like a quick take segment for a bit before reacting to what your guys' free agent predictions. Lakers hope to bring back Dennis Schroeder after playing on a vet minimum. I think, as a quick take, I think this is a great move by the Lakers because he obviously outperformed that contract. He turned down 20 mil years ago, became a meme, bounced around the league to Boston, then went to Germany, and then now back to the Lakers. So Lakers will obviously need to pay him more money, maybe lose some depth, but again, if they want Kyrie or Draymond, they can't get him back. So I think this is a move that eliminates the Lakers from Kyrie and Draymond Green. What do you think?
I think it's a good move. I mean, of course, you would like to add Kyrie or Draymond, but I think you don't want to deplete too much of your depth. And Dennis Schroeder is a great point guard, competitive point guard next to LeBron and AD, and it really showed in the playoffs.
I agree. I mean, we touched on Kuzma could be staying in DC. 76ers not extending Maxey. Initially, when I saw the alert, I thought it was big news, but they're definitely gonna get him back. Like they really need, like they say, the flexibility because now they're finding a trade for Harden, which I still can't believe. It's most likely gonna be a loss if it's not Paul George or if it's not somehow just not listening to James Harden, and if it's not somehow potentially orchestrating a three-team deal that lands Damian Lillard in Philly. That would be a pretty intriguing. Send Harden to a competing team. Blazers get like young guys and assets. Sixers get Damian Lillard. That might be a win-win for all teams involved. So, I mean, I'm just floating that out there. It's not really big news. Bucks, I mean, like I said, contending teams will just be going for depth. Bucks are expected to keep Crowder, even though Crowder might be going back to Miami. I don't, to be honest, I don't understand it because outwardly expressed his frustration of not playing minutes, and so the Bucks didn't really do anything in terms of their depth. So I'm not sure what's going to be different next year. The Bucks, I mean, if Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez leave, then I think all eyes turn to Giannis and what he's going to say about it. Just saying. So Jay Crowder, it's kind of odd to keep him, especially if not many players are leaving. But I think the Bucks, they're in a really tough situation this offseason because their number one priority before signing any more depth is to keep Middleton, to keep Brook Lopez, because at the end of the day, if Giannis is not happy and requests a trade, you're done. So what do you think the Bucks should do this offseason with this report?
I definitely got to re-sign those two guys because you're not gonna compete probably without those two guys because there's no really anywhere else to pivot to. So you got to keep Giannis happy and re-sign those two guys, and still gonna be competing for championship.
I agree. The Clippers are still eyeing Malcolm Brogdon despite some injury concerns that broke the trade apart, which sent Porzingis to Boston. Obviously, Marcus Smart is now in Memphis. I think Memphis definitely benefited from all of this if the Clippers are still going to get Brogdon. Boston still had to trade, like, honestly, a Celtic legend and fan favorite, Marcus Smart. So what do you think of the Clippers still eyeing Malcolm Brogdon?
I mean, I think that's a good move for them. I mean, it's still the Russell Westbrook situation. We don't really know exactly what's going on over there, but I still think Brogdon is a very good complementary piece for them. But if you're the Boston Celtics, you do not move on from Malcolm Brogdon unless the package is absolutely massive. Because he was a great, great sixth man last year, and he still will be this year.
And I'm not sure, even though Derek White
Or
kind of
starting,
started,
maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
six man, but even though Derek White started fine coming into his own, I don't think they should move on from Malcolm Brogdon, especially that quickly. That makes no sense to me. Like, this dude may have been an underwhelming draft class, but this dude was rookie of the year. People tend to forget. And was he sixth man of the year, or was that someone else?
I believe it was, yeah.
Malcolm
I don't
Brogdon.
remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was.
So that's just even more crazy. Nets trading Joe Harris. They've been wanting to move him for a while. He goes to Detroit for 2 future second round picks. I think, honestly, if they traded him earlier, like a year and a half ago, when reports first started, they would have gotten more. So I think teams just pointlessly wait for something, it seems. And I mean, you mentioned the Clippers briefly. James Harden is now in the mix all of a sudden. And
Hmm.
the Heat, Cavs in a sign and trade negotiation with Miami for Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson, all these undrafted players. They're about to get so much money because Miami, they've done so well finding all these gems. Like, I think Caleb Martin, I'm pretty sure I get the Twins confused. I'm pretty sure it's Caleb Martin. He's going to get a bag soon too. And Miami, they might have to lose. It's gonna sting, honestly. I mean, I'm a huge Jimmy Butler fan. I like Max Strus. Obviously, Oladipo is staying. Duncan Robinson is obviously under that contract, who people thought were bad, but Duncan Robinson showed us who he was again in this playoff. So I think the Heat still have a decent amount of depth, and obviously, if they get a Kyrie Irving or a Damian Lillard, I think the Heat, they're in a great position, to be honest. Like, they're just need to sign, like I said, Kyrie, maybe trade for Harden. We'll see what happens there. Maybe trade for Damian Lillard. If they get one of those three players, then I think they're gonna be big time favorites, to be honest. And I think, like I said, if it's not, I mean, I floated that three-team idea that sends Dame to Philly, Harden to a competing team, and players who get like picks, young guys and stuff. But I think if it's not for a superstar, then Philly's really gonna lose, feel bad about themselves for tanking for Ben Simmons. Obviously, he was like a all-star, almost defensive player of the year and whatnot. But with the way that thing ended, It's just going to be a huge loss for the Philly for the past few years, honestly, because you have Joel Embiid, you have Tsitsipas, and it's not going to work out. But Miami, I feel like they're sitting well in free agency. So what do you think about the Miami situation?
Yeah, they're honestly in a great situation, and also you people forget, but they're Tyler Hero, who was so close to coming back from injury, but he should be back and healthy by the start of next season. So that's another great piece that you have there. And yeah, if they do trade for Damian Lillard, that team is going to be great. Dame, Bam, and Jimmy Butler. That's honestly a great trio because they all complement each other pretty well, I would think. And and if you're the Heat, you kind of needed that third scorer that can get you the 20 points, 30 points, whatever, because you can't just rely on Jimmy Butler every single game. Saw that in the playoffs. Jimmy tried to do it his best, but you can't rely on him all the time. Of course, some of the guys stepped up, like Struess, like Martin, but you're gonna need that third star or a third 20-point a game scorer if you want to win a title for if you're the Miami Heat.
Yeah, and then I agree that ends our sort of quick take segment, and then sort of towards the end of the live stream now we will uh, now load up Instagram. So I said you guys would be featured if you put in your takes. Kyle Tippett says Damian Lillard to Miami. We all agree with that. I feel like we mentioned it, just talked about it. Mason Gurkanak says Harden. I know he is a Philly fan. He says Harden to the Clippers. All reports point towards Harden landing in Philly. Again, chemistry and health will be the only thing Clippers will need to sort out. And it's looking like Paul George isn't in that conversation. So I think it's going to be a huge loss for Philly. And Embiid probably feels like betrayed by Simmons, betrayed by Harden. And so it's just kind of crazy to me. So what do you think? I mean, this whole Harden situation is crazy. And especially, it's going to be a huge loss for Philly as a city, especially if Embiid requests a trade in the same offseason.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many dominoes that can fall from this. If he does get traded to LA, then of course Harden. I mean, sorry, Embiid probably upset, and maybe Embiid gets traded, and maybe that causes another domino, and maybe that causes another domino. I mean, there's just so many things that can stem from this one little trade, or it's a big trade, but like which is one trade in this, the many they're probably going to see this off season. Uh, it's just so interesting to think about because I mean, of course, you have the Harden trade, you have the Tobias Harris trade coming, and then you could see an Embiid trade, and then I mean, it's just so much going on with that with Philadelphia organization. If they're in a tough situation, I don't know what they're going to do, especially if you can't keep in Joel Embiid. That's just a tough loss because you're not going to get much out of Harden. I wouldn't think. I mean, you're going to get some picks, but I wouldn't think it's going to be a whole lot to help a rebuild. Of course, you get a lot of Embiid, but it's going to be interesting to see where that team ends up at the end of the offseason.
I agree. It's going to be a crazy free agency. Like we've said, that ends our NBA free agency special live stream. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Tune in next week for the normal episode where at that point maybe Harden gets traded, Draymond signs to, I'll say, a team, likely the Warriors. The Rockets might be a sneaky team in the play-in tournament, so we'll see what happens. A lot of dominoes to fall. This free agency period starts in approximately 20 minutes. We'll see what happens. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week for episode 71.